This is Billy and Tyler, and we will be presenting the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation was a religious movement that started in the 1500s in Europe. Some causes of the Reformation were Renaissance ideas like emphasis on secular and individual beliefs, difficulty for the Pope to impose central authority, and the focus on the Church's corruptness. People were influenced by the Renaissance emphasis on secular beliefs, which led to people challenging the Church authority. Next, in a country such as Germany, it was divided into many different states and was extremely difficult for the Pope to impose central authority. Also, many church authorities admitted to doing things such as fathering children and engaging in things such as drinking and gambling. Due to things such as these, in 1517, a monk by the name of Martin Luther proposed his ideas and solutions to problems in an essay called the 95 Theses. In this essay, a major issue that he had with the church was the selling of indulgences. Indulgences are a pardon releasing a person from punishments due for a sin. A friar named Johann Tetzel gave the impression that by selling these indulgences one could buy their way into heaven. The biggest teachings of Luther that contradicted the Catholic Church were that people could win salvation only by faith in God's gifts of forgiveness. Next, he believed that all church statements should be clearly based on the words of the Bible. He wanted the Mass to be taught in the vernacular, or the local language, instead of Latin, as well as a limited focus on saints. Lastly, he thought that all people with faith were equal, so therefore people did not need priests to interpret the Bible. As his ideas rapidly spread throughout Europe, the church authority and the Pope began to get worried. Pope Leo asked Luther to take back his views of the church, but when Luther refused, he excommunicated him from the Catholic Church. Later on, in 1521, Emperor Charles V sent Luther to trial in the city of Worms. Here he issued an imperial order, the Edict of Worms. The final decision of the Edict of Worms was that they declared Luther an outlaw and a heretic. Other groups, such as the peasants, took Luther's ideas as a reason to revolt for the end of serfdom. Luther was horrified by these actions and informed the German princes to show them no mercy. In Germany, 1529, the people that stayed loyal to the Pope agreed to join forces against Luther, whereas the people who did not want to fight against Luther's ideas protested. The group of people that supported Luther and protested fighting against him became known as the Protestants. From within the Protestants, many groups started up, one being Lutheranism. Charles V was still determined to keep his subjects Catholic and eventually went to war with the Protestants. After years of fighting, in the year 1555, Charles called the Peace of Augsburg, which the princes chose the religion of their kingdom, ending the violence. Henry VIII later became the King of England, but had a major issue with the Catholic Church. Henry and his wife Catherine were unable to have a son, which would leave no heir. Since it was against Catholic tradition to get a divorce, he called Parliament into session to try and ask to pass a set of laws enabling him to file for a divorce. Parliament later agreed to pass this law and also made Henry the official head of the Catholic Church. After the death of Henry, 3 of his children assumed power, resulting in religious turmoil. Eventually, one of his daughters, by the name of Elizabeth, was determined to return the kingdom to Protestantism. The result of this was the Anglican Church, which was the only legal church in England.
Protestant movements were starting up all over Europe during the 1500s. This time, John Calvin was leading the charge. Calvin taught that people are sinful by nature and predestination, which means that God chooses those destined for heaven and hell, and nothing that people do in their lives can change that. Calvin created a theocracy in Geneva, Switzerland, meaning that it was governed by religious figures and it had strict religious rules based on his teaching. In other parts of Europe, the Swiss, French, and Dutch also adopted Calvin's version of Christianity, but they often loosened his strict rules. In France, the followers of Calvinism were called Huguenots, who were often persecuted by the Catholics. Most Protestants taught that the Bible is the only source of faith and truth, as opposed to the Catholics, who believed that both the Bible and religious documents, called tradition, were acceptable sources. Protestants interpreted the Bible for themselves, which led many to come to different conclusions and form their own groups. The Anabaptists were one of those groups who created their own spin on the Christian theology. They believed that people should only be baptized once they were old enough to decide whether or not they wanted to. They also believed in separation of church and state, refraining from violence, and communal sharing of possessions. Both the Protestants and the Catholics saw the Anabaptists as a threat to them and their beliefs, so they persecuted them, but in the end they persevered. The Protestant Reformation gained many followers, but the Catholic Church was still around and relevant. The Catholic Church started to reform itself to counter the Protestant Reformation. This is called the Catholic Reformation, or the Counter-Reformation. One of the reformers was St. Francis of Loyola, who created the Jesuits. The Jesuits had three goals: founding schools, converting people to Catholicism, and stopping Protestantism. Pope Paul, Pope from 1534 to 1549, did four things to reform the Catholic Church. Firstly, he investigated the selling of indulgences. Secondly, he approved the Jesuit order. And thirdly, he used the Inquisition, which is the papal judicial process to punish heretics, to stop heresy that the Protestant churches were teaching. And lastly, he called the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent was a meeting of bishops in northern Italy that established three doctrines. The first was that only the Church could interpret the Bible, and any other interpretations were heresy. The second was that Christians needed faith and good works to be saved. And the Bible and the Church were equal sources of faith, and the selling of indulgences was banned. The next pope, Paul IV, continued the work of his predecessor. One of the things that he established was a forbidden books list, which established that all books that were on it were considered heresy, including Protestant Bibles, and were to be burned. The Protestant Reformation had a number of religious, social, and political effects. The Protestant movement continued to grow despite persecution and conflicts. The Catholic Church also became more unified because of it. Both denominations started to use education as a tool for unity in furthering their religion. Women reformers tried to change the role of women in the church, but they are mostly still confined to domestic affairs. The Catholic Church began to lose political power in this period, which led to nation-states forming and strengthening. The Reformation's theme of questioning authority played into the Enlightenment movement and other later developments in Europe. The Reformation was mainly concerned with religion, but its effects reached into all facets of life and society, and it shapes our lives today. Thank you.